All right, we're going to be beginning today's live stream very soon. This is James, founder of Radio.co. The Radio.co request show will be beginning in 1 minute's time, so stay where you are. Hey guys, it's welcome along. This is James from Radio.co. We're going to be starting today's session in about 30 seconds time. Stay where you are. We're going to be beginning very, very soon. All right, we're live. Welcome to the first ever Radio.co request show. I hope you liked our little jingle there. I'm joined today by Phil. Hi, Phil. How's it going? I need to unmute you, of course, and also Mike as well. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
So we're live. We are doing pretty well, actually. We've already got quite a few people connected. So this is the first ever Radio.co request show. We're going to be taking your questions. We've got probably about, I don't know, how many hundred responses have we had to the initial outcry?
Over 100. It's about 120 or so last time I checked.
Yeah, so we're going to try and get through. We'll be with you for about 45 minutes today. Going to try and get through as many as possible. If you've got any comments or questions, please leave them. We're going out live across Facebook, YouTube, and also Twitter. Graham's manning the comments, so if you've got any questions for us, please put them in the comments. Likewise, if you've got anything you think can add value to someone's radio station, we'd love to hear. All right, Phil, I think you're going to kick things off today.
I certainly am. Well, I mean, the first thing I'm going to ask is something that, a lot of people tend to ask me because, I speak to a lot of, of you guys, a lot of customers, a lot of people interested in getting into radio. And, the first question I'm going to ask is, it's a bit of a cheat because I actually called him on the phone yesterday to discuss this exact thing, but it's just good advice to sort of share with everyone. It was a question from, I've just lost it now. It is Lester. And so Lester said that, as someone who just wants to start just a local homebred station, what's the best package? Because people can be put off by the fact that it's like, well, there's so many different packages available on Radio.co. Which one's the right one for me? And really, it's all down to what you find comfortable. Really, it's not just a case of budget. I guess it's a case of what you want to get out of your station. So whether you're starting off small, it doesn't really matter. You can upgrade with Radio.co as much as you want. So with our light plan, it's a really good way of I always class it as a very good jumping off point. It gives you the confidence, the courage to experiment, have a little play around with it. And if you do want access to some of our like advanced features, like we have our voice tracking, mobile mobile streaming, live recording, then you can always upgrade to a bigger package. But it's a case of just start where you think, where you find yourself comfortable, because you can upgrade sort of anytime you like, really. It's, it's up to you. You don't want to jump into something as exciting as radio and be suddenly bombarded with, there's too much to handle. So, just take it easy into something. Radio is great fun, but not if it's, you've sort of, I guess, taken on too much at once, really.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. And actually, I'd add as well, with these kind of things, just start doing something. People often think too much about what they need to do and how they need to do it.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, like you probably agree with this, James, I'd imagine the way to build anything is to just do something.
I think so, and also don't try and do too much at once. think about this as a progressive, project. Start with the basics, get the stream up and running, get some music on the go, figure out what your program output's going to sound like. Because again, I think, interestingly, we just put together a guide called the 5-step radio startup checklist. Okay. If anyone's not got hold of that, you can get it free. Just go to jamesm.com/radio. That's James M for Mike.com/radio. And you can download it free for there. And basically it's 5 steps to getting your station started. And believe it or not, contrary to a lot of questions, because if you look at some of the questions that come in, it's always like, what sort of equipment do I need to get started? What do I need to buy? Actually starting with a good solid idea, I think it will set you up and then pay dividends further down the line. What do you guys think?
I totally agree with that. I was going to say that's often what people do, is that they think about all the stuff that they need to get, and then they think about how they're going to build an audience. And it's like, you kind of just need to take a step back and do that kind of a bit in reverse.
Yeah, and so the as you said, I think the audience is a key point there, and this is one of the things I cover off in the guide, is actually how to define, who is your audience and who's going to be listening to your radio station. Because ultimately, let's remember, the first thing about radio is you're doing it for people to listen to, and you're providing some kind of entertainment or some kind of information, and ultimately the listeners must be first and foremost, and they need to be right at the front of the picture.
Yeah, because ultimately you are doing something that's, I guess, a hobby or a potential career path, for yourself doing it. But ultimately, you're providing a service, and people out there are wanting that service. Whether it is just particularly during these quite testing times at the moment, is it just a way of people being entertained? Is it a way of keeping people informed? So, it's a service you're starting. So think about the audience, first. That after all, they're the most important thing of radio.
Okay, so leading from that, I was going to say, leading from that, there's quite a lot of listener-based questions, so we jump into them.
Yeah, and also something about music as well. I was going to just kick off with a little tip, which I've been, which I was actually playing with a few years ago, and it works really well. This comes from Katie Robinson, and she asks, what is the best platform to access music to play on my station? Is it paid? Can I use any songs I want? So here's the deal with music. Everyone now, we're so reliant on streaming music and having everything at our fingertips, via Spotify. But obviously, the way Spotify's licensing work is you can't use it for commercial purposes. So you're not really supposed to use it on the radio. So most radio stations still rely on owning a media library, which obviously, you can buy tracks through the standard route, using, say, Apple, iTunes Store, or buy them on Amazon, MP3s. But there's actually a really cheap way of acquiring music. It does require a little bit of time. But this was a technique I used a few years ago. We had a station here in Manchester called NQRFM. Michael remember this. And probably about 5 years ago now. And we wanted to kind of define it as kind of quite cool, hipster underground. Not really my taste in music personally. So what was the quickest, fastest way to acquire a lot of music in this category? Well, here's a little trick that most people don't even consider, which allows you to get a lot of music very, very cheaply, and you're actually buying it completely legally, e.g. you own it. And it's very much underlooked. Go onto Amazon, type in the name of a CD. It might be an album, or it could be a compilation CD, and buy it secondhand. Now, all you need to do is get that CD. Sometimes you can spend $2 or $3 on a CD. You get maybe 30 tracks on it. If it's a double album, it could be like 40 different songs. Secondhand doesn't matter because you're not going to keep it. You don't really need it. Just rip the files as MP3s. Now, you spent £3 buying 40 tracks. If you were to buy them individually, you'd be spent on an MP3 service like iTunes. You'd be spending a lot more money. So that's a good way of getting a lot of music very, very cheaply. Just a quick tip to kick us off there.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea, actually. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, particularly here. So particularly here in the UK, there are a lot of, secondhand stores and stuff selling CDs that were once, 20 quid when they're back, the now, that's what I call music, the biggest hits of particular years. And you can buy them for 10p, just absolutely nothing. So it's a great tip.
It's a little bit of a time investment. You've got to rip them all onto your computer. It doesn't take that long. But then, it's a good way to really bulk out your music library.
But I think that's a good point. It's like when you're starting out doing anything, you've got to think of different ways to do things, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And ultimately that's a really good shortcut to sort of having a media library, basically, without bankrupting yourself.
Yeah, so that's the first question of the day. Okay, I'll let someone else kick off now.
So listeners, right? So there's about 5 different questions from different people about listeners. So CBS Radio Uganda says, how can I get new listeners? Free Agent Radio says, what are some ways to grow your listeners? Elect Station says, how can I reach listeners? Is That Jazz Radio says, how to best reach listeners? KWDS says, listeners, and fans. How do I get them? And then lastly, we've got, it's Elect again. They've submitted it twice. How can I reach listeners?
Yeah.
So there's 5 questions all about listeners. So let's sort of talk about listeners. I would say the first thing to always think about with this kind of stuff is to never forget about who you're making things for. Yeah. Like ultimately, you need to make content that they care about, talk about things that they care about. You know, how can you tap into their sort of everyday experience? I think that's the main thing. And I think that's the thing that people tend to really overlook. They think too much about what they enjoy. And it's not really about what you enjoy. It's about your audience and what they want to hear. So that's the first thing, is put your audience at front and center when you're making decisions about what you should do and what your strategy should be. And secondly, I would say a really important thing to do is connect with people and talk to them, whether that's on social media, whether it's across, an email newsletter. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're talking to people, that you're talking to the people that are going to be investing in your station, that are going to be, your listeners that are going to tune in every day. Because that's what you want. When you're running a station, you want people tuning in every day. That's ultimately your aim. Because if they're not tuning in every day, it's not part of their everyday experience. And your station really needs to be, I think. So, don't just use sort of communication channels like email and social media to blanket broadcast information at people. Talk to them, ask them questions, find out what makes them tick. And ultimately, those kind of things will inform your station's strategy on a much deeper level. I would say the other thing to think about, and this is something that we often talk about internally at Radio.co, is piggybacking. So this is just like a phrase that we use, and it's about piggybacking off other people's momentum and off other people's audience. So, you could go out there, find really interesting guests that have got audiences themselves, get them on your station, because then they're going to be talking about your station to their audience ultimately. And likewise, be a guest yourself. Go out there, find different shows and different radio stations that you can be a guest on. I think they're kind of like my main tips.
Yeah, I think they're all really, really good points, actually, Mike. And, especially the thing about engaging and doing joint ventures with other stations. Look at who else is out there, and it's very easy to think, they're competitors, we don't want anything to do with them. But actually, you're going to share a lot of the same audiences. Or maybe don't go look at, direct competition, but find other stations that perhaps complement what you're doing, and you can cross promote each other. It's a really good way. And like you say, finding people who have got audiences. There's lots of DJs out there, lots of music enthusiasts who have got really passionate followings who would probably love to talk about your radio station. But the way you get them to do that isn't necessarily by just messaging them saying, please, can you shout out and tell everyone about my radio station? It's about engaging with them. So, invite them in for an interview, record that interview, and then say, by the way, your interview's gone live. Please, can you share it with your followers? That is the key to kind of really growing your audience, I think.
You can't work in isolation, basically.
No, absolutely not. The other thing which I think I see a lot of stations really falling short of is just the ability. I've just cut myself off there. The other thing I think I see a lot of stations falling really short of is actually content strategy. All right. And when I say content strategy, I mean having a clear and regular output of written content, which then will also turn into stuff on your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, your Instagram, and also video content as well. I think nowadays you really need a video strategy if you're going to make a big success of any radio station. You can't just rely on audio alone. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be talking to the camera like this. It could be animated things. So content ideas, here's a few for you, which will be really cross-purposeful to almost any format. So stuff like top 10 songs, here are the 10 songs that were on the chart 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. Okay, which is your favorite? And always remember to sort of finish with a question. You know, you want people to actually engage with what you're talking about, not just think, oh yeah, I remember that. You know, the chances are if you post the top 10 songs from 10 years ago or 20 years ago, depending on the age of your audience, and again, it needs to be tailored depending on the genre you're going after, the age of your audience, that kind of thing, people will get engaged with that sort of content. Next up, song lyrics. Everyone who likes music always remembers certain lyrics. So you can do so much content around lyrics. You know, here are our top 3 lyrics of all time. What are yours? What lyrics are poetry to you? Pick an iconic 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, you know, lyric that should be displayed loud and proud. Again, all this stuff can be turned into images as well. So don't just think about this as, you know, a text post. Again, you can turn a lot of this into video content. There's so many tools online which allow you to create animated content, which you can post as stories on Instagram or little videos on Twitter. This kind of content is really wildly shareable as well. You know, again, it doesn't have to necessarily be about music. For example, here's one of these quotes, which I'm just pulling out of this 5-step radio checklist. Again, as if you say you want to download this, jamesm.com/radio. Many people listen to us in the shower. Have you had a moment of clarity in the shower recently? Everyone listens to the radio in the shower. Share your shower thoughts with us. Nothing to do with music, but just generally kind of getting your audience engaged. And it's kind of tweets like that pretty much anyone can relate to. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit weird bringing up wrestling in something about radio, but it's like when a wrestler would come out or any sports person would come out and say like, hello, New York, or whatever like that, they'd call it a cheap pop because they knew audiences are just going to cheer regardless. And it's kind of a bit like that. It might seem like cheap content because it's easy, but it's by no means not. It's so rich getting people just to, even if it's just interacting, I remember that song, I remember that, you know, and it's such an easy way to create really good interactive content, just simply through like nostalgia, and you know, it's everywhere. Everyone shares the same interests. Yeah. And
again, you can turn stuff on its head as well. So, you know, you could say these are our top 5 albums of all time. Might get a reaction, but then you can be sort of damn sure that if you put these are our top 5 worst albums of all time, it's almost going to get a better reaction, because people like nostalgia, but also people like to kind of have something that's going to challenge them. They want to agree with it or disagree with it. You want to cause a little bit of controversy sometimes. So
I think that's a really good call, actually. Do the opposite of, that's the way to get real engagement. Yeah, that's completely spot on. I mean, like that asking question things is totally correct. It's like, this works really well on social media. Twitter's perfect for this. Twitter and Facebook, really, but Twitter more so. It's like taking those requests, what's your favorite track? Basically, get your audience to fight it out amongst themselves. Like that whole pitching one band against another is always a good way of getting people to argue about something.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So that's a bunch of stuff about content. That's a bunch of stuff about getting listeners. A bit later on, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into someone's website, one of our clients' websites as well. They've been in touch and asked us if we could take a look at their strategy and what, you know, make some recommendations of how we can improve. And a lot of what we just said rings really true with what they're doing. So I'll hopefully give you some more visual examples in a bit.
I just spotted one question that I thought might be quite a good lead off this. Okay. It's from Mr. Alex from Mystery Train Radio, and he says, just looking for new ways to promote the station. I think I'm doing okay with Twitter and Facebook, just getting into Instagram, but what's the best and most effective way of promoting a station outside of these areas?
Interesting. I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying about getting people involved. So some of you may know we ran a radio station here in Manchester very successfully for a couple of years. We had about 500,000 people listening to it and engaged with it every single week. And one of the main strategies that we used to do that, we had a very kind of small in-house team of 3 or 4 people who were kind of managing the day-to-day operations. But we had a very large army of volunteers who would give up their time, not just to DJ on air, because I think everyone always assumes everyone wants to be behind the microphone. Everyone wants to be, you know, in front of the audience. That's not always the case. We had no issue whatsoever getting plenty of people on board with doing things like writing content for the blog, you know, and again, relying on social media alone is one thing, but you can get a lot of traffic through Google if you can pick a search term that there's getting a lot of traffic and maybe not that competition, and funnel those, and your audience, and you're writing content that's really relevant to them, you will drive listeners. So think about reviewing gigs that, bands that you're playing if they're touring, if they're in the local area, write a review. This is the sort of thing we did. If you turn around to the promotions company who are doing that tour and say, can we send someone to write a review of the gig, they give you free tickets. All right. Not only can you give these tickets for free as a promise, you get to go to a gig for free if you're doing us a favor and writing a review, which is fantastic. Everyone wants to go and see their favorite artist or band for free, right? But you're getting content in response, but you can also use these things as like competition giveaways too. So you could say retweet to win a pair of tickets. So it's all about being very clever with how you're leveraging what you're passionate about, leveraging what your audience is looking for.
Yeah, and kind of coming off that as well, with in regards to people, one of the main questions I get asked a lot when I do demo people is, people have the anxiety of, oh, can I really manage this on your own? It's like, well, you could, but in the exact same way you can find people to listen to your station online, social media, for example, you can do the exact same people who want to, work on your station, as you were saying, James. You had an army of, backstage people who, kind of kept everything running. So, if you want people to host on your show or just help you get things, things like social media is really good just for finding people of interest who are just willing to do something voluntarily because it's part of something. Well, it's part of something cool. It's radio. It's passionate, and with our with the great sort of online radio like we've got here, it's all done remotely. People can help you out from their own homes, from the other side of the world if they wanted to. So it's incredibly easy to not have to run a radio station on your own. I
think that's spot on. I think basically radio is one of those cool kind of areas where people are genuinely passionate about it. So you're never going to have a lack of people wanting to get involved in something. I think that's completely true.
Interestingly, one of the we're seeing, I think it's approximately double the amount of traffic across the board to all of our clients that we were, say, 3 months ago at the start of the year. 3 times the amount of traffic. Yeah. So right now is a great time to start. More people are listening to radio because they want that human connection, and people are not listening to as many things like Spotify playlists because they need to be entertained. They need that human connection. The sort of social connections that we're normally having and we're used to have kind of just been stripped away from everyone. So it's a tough time, but you turn to the radio. Most people have it on all day in the background. I do, because I want to listen to someone rather, it's just a sort of natural thing, isn't it? Cool. Okay. So we've got just to sort of have a pause for a sec. If anyone's got any questions or comments on anything we've talked about so far, please put them into the chat. We'll happily sort of give you a shout out. We've got a few things coming in here. Guy called Drew Segura. Can you guys make a directory of all your clients so we can hear different stations? Well, I mean, we could do, but I think there are plenty of obviously directories out there at the moment. So if you want some examples, I'd say go to tunein.com. That's obviously the biggest. There's tons of inspiration on there.
There's some of the good stations that I can reel off the top of my head: Foundation FM, Soho Radio, Boogaloo.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting stations on there. We've seen some really interesting stations being created over the past couple of months, couple of weeks as well, whilst all this has been going on. Honest Burgers, which is like a chain in the UK, they created a station to engage their staff, and what they found is it's engaging their audience as well. So they've just rolled it out.
Yeah. I think that's some of the most interesting case studies, and there are quite a few on our website and on YouTube as well, aren't necessarily what you traditionally imagine to be radio stations. It's people who are using radio to complement something else. Again, this is something else you can potentially do if you're interested in starting a radio station and there's a kind of clear, for example, Boogaloo, like you said before, they're a pub in London. They serve alcohol. That is their business, right? They aren't traditionally a radio station, but the pub is famous for having this connection, this rich history with the music industry. There were so many bands back in the sort of 70s and 80s that were kind of broke there and kind of got their sort of the breakthrough. So because of this connection with the music industry, it seemed logical that they could introduce a radio format, on top of still just being a pub. So, if you can think of a iconic music venue in your area and they don't have a radio station, but you're really passionate about the kinds of artists they have playing there, get in touch with them. See if you can kind of do some sort of joint venture, because they've already got an audience.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Now, time for another question. So this is a really good one, actually. So this is from Alex Castro Padilla. And Alex asks, hi, there's a boom with visual radio today. I want to start a radio station online. Should I start using a visual concept, or just go sort of traditional, only listen, through radio with an app?
That's very interesting.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Go on, Phil.
I was just saying, yeah, you can't deny, even though radio is strictly audio, it's, there is this huge rise and people expect, sort of videos to come as well. Same with like podcasting as well. A lot of people are launching podcasts on YouTube, which is not typically, sort of a platform for that. So it's something that you can't deny its existence. And I guess it's incorporating it in your, in your radio station. After all, you're taking your radio station to a different audience who would much rather watch, than listen. Of course, I guess you would have to have a face for radio, I think, if the visual sort of did take off. But you can't deny sort of how popular it's all of a sudden become.
I think you could do something really interesting. Go on, James. You go.
I'd say don't just think of visual radio in the traditional way, where like a lot of commercial stations have cameras set up, rigs in their studios, and they're necessarily always they're basically just recording the presenter speaking. Think about what additional content you can create to complement what your on-air output is, and that doesn't have to necessarily be a big fancy studio with lots of lights and cameras. It can just be you speaking to your phone and just sort of either teasing what's coming up, or talking about a recent interview you did, or just engaging with your audience, doing Ask Me Anything stuff like this, quite cute live Q&As. Doesn't necessarily always have to be connected directly to what's going on air. But, I'd say, and if you're camera shy, use animated videos, to tell stories. You can still make an impact by, like I said earlier, top 10 records that were on the chart this time 10 years ago. 1 album cover, 2 album cover, 3, you're not in front of the camera there. It's still video and it's still visual radio. So there's lots and lots of different things you can do.
I think that's a really good point. Thinking about what your radio station looks like is probably a smart thing to do, really, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. Some of I think, like you mentioned before, Foundation FM, really kind of sort of cool looking, quite in your face brand, but they've done a great job with it, So certainly there's an argument that if you're getting started, if you've got some sort of budget, hiring a graphic designer is always a good way to start. Get someone to put together a brand pack, so you've got a color scheme to use. You don't have to have like everything designed, but at least kind of start with maybe some fonts that are a bit different. Don't just use the standard, Arial or Helvetica that everyone else uses. Try, there's so many cool fonts out there now. Try and think of something that's a bit edgy and it's going to make you stand out. Get a color palette that is consistent across your social media, your website, any kind of video content you do.
I was looking at something, interestingly, I was looking at something yesterday, which is on opensource.glassanimals.com.
Yep.
That's a really interesting visual radio station.
What's that? Open source.
I'll send you the link.
Open source.
I'll stick it in the chat. One sec.
If we can post it in the group chat. Thanks for all the questions, guys. Please keep them coming in.
I'll post it. It's great. I mean, it's very niche, but it's an interesting way of thinking about a visual radio station.
Yeah. Just seeing another question, which I'm going to just quickly take. Came from actually Katie Robinson. I read that TuneIn isn't accepting new stations. Is this true? And if they aren't, we're just adding your stations to. Look, the thing is with TuneIn, they've been a bit funny. As I understand it, if you're licensed and you can get in touch with them directly and prove that you have a license and everything, they may include you. They aren't not accepting new stations. They're just being very, very selective about which stations they do include. So it's always worth reaching out to them and trying to have a discussion. In terms of can anyone just submit a station, I think they've clamped down a lot on that, unfortunately. However, there are plenty of other directories out there. If you just type in radio.co station directories, we've got a blog post which will list all of them.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to go for another question?
Yeah, go. You guys want to take a couple? I feel like I've been speaking loads. So,
I mean, it's sort of like from my end, sort of a popular question that I've seen, pop up on the chat here, and ones that were submitted to us before is obviously, we've talked a lot about getting people involved. I mean, it's how do you get callers on your station? You don't necessarily need an old school phone line built into a studio. There are a couple of sort of easy ways to do it. I mean, in some regards, it's a little bit more difficult to do it with the newer kind of phones. Like, I guess the easiest way is to, you can plug mobile phone into a mixing desk, just via simple 3.5mm jacks in it into a mixing desk. Someone calls, fade them up. That's it. It's playing through the mixing desk. It's playing on air. Of course, new phones have kind of scrapped that headphone jack. So it's so if you've got a newer phone, it's not not sort of the easiest method to do it that way. But just using online tools like Skype or Google Meet, or anything like that. Just to get someone on air, line them up, speak to them, and you can sort of manage it quite easily just from your computer then.
Yep, you can also use Radio.co Talk if you've got a plan that supports it, which makes it really easy to conference people together. You can record the call as well and light it up for broadcast, or you could just stream it live. So one of the things I was going to add to that as well is, there are a number of services that actually have better audio quality. So the traditional phone line method actually doesn't sound the best anymore. If you're going to take calls, try and do it using, like, for example, WhatsApp audio. The codecs used are better quality, so you'll get kind of better quality result. And obviously there are other platforms which will allow this. You can make calls on Facebook, etc., etc.
I've spotted a good one to go with next.
Sure.
I just want to work out who it was from. Rob at Manchester Weekly. Quite a big question, but where do you see the future of radio?
Ooh,
that's a good question.
I think it's interesting to think about that one, particularly in terms of what's happening to radio at the moment. So going back to what you were talking about before, James, not only have our listeners, our customers' listeners levels shot right up by 3 times, overall across the industry, what's happened is streaming platforms that we all know, Pandora, etc., all those kind of platforms, their listening's down quite a lot at the moment. But radio listening as a whole, so iHeart in the UK, it's the BBC, the listening on those platforms is right up. So I think it's partly this human connection thing. I think streaming platforms are also down probably because of commute. People probably listen to streaming music on commutes. But I think that's really interesting. And so I think it's interesting to think about what might happen next for radio, because it's suddenly become very relevant to people's lives again.
I mean, I think, this is the thing. People have been asking this question for a long time now, probably 30 years. In the 80s, everyone was like, video killed the radio star, blah, blah, blah. Is TV going to, kill radio? TV didn't kill radio. Video didn't kill radio. The internet hasn't. I recorded a video and I think it might still be online somewhere back in 2011. I think it was the start of 2011. And I was making this prediction that one of the things that we'd all be seeing was going to be radio in people's kitchens. So traditionally back then, listening to radio on your mobile device was still quite a new thing. Most people were still tuning in on their laptop or on their desktop. And I said, that we got this thing sent through from Philips, and it was basically like this big home hi-fi system with 2 speakers, like one of those old, but they'd added an internet radio to it, which was fantastic. But it was still kind of quite clunky and old-fashioned. I think you need to plug in with Ethernet. Fast forward 10 years, what has everyone now got in the kitchen? Google Home or Alexa devices. So even just since we launched, Radio.co's 5 years old this summer, we didn't have those kinds of devices available when we launched Radio.co. It was so even those 5 years, it's changed a lot. I don't think radio is going anywhere. As I say, it's interesting the increase in traffic we've seen in traffic over the last couple of months just still shows that people are really super engaged with the format.
Yeah, I think people love radio.
Yeah, and something that we've learned as well, the fact that car manufacturers are still like building cars built around their radio because they know just how important it is, even if it's just for a short or long journey. So, if car manufacturers, the biggest manufacturers in the world, are still thinking, putting radio at the forefront, then yeah, there's not a chance it's going to go anywhere anytime soon.
I've just seen what's this about? While you're live, can you tell people to stop putting raisins in the damn potato salad? That's an interesting. I don't know what's that about.
I've not seen raisins in potato salad. Oh no, you do get raisins in potato salad. I have seen that.
Yeah,
I've seen that, but it's not related to radio, so let's not worry about it.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, where are we going next? Equipment. What do you?
Yeah, I can kick off with equipment. Someone's just made a good point, actually, saying we were talking about doing phone-ins before. The Rode Procaster, which is a great bit of kit. And that's great to do call-ins simply because you can Bluetooth your phone to it and it shows up as an external sound card. So you don't even need a cable. Like you said earlier, Phil, most phones don't have a headphone jack on or Bluetooth's the way forward. I think there's a couple of desks that have got Bluetooth connectivity actually. So that's so if you're willing to make an investment, that's a good bit of kit. You can take it anywhere. You can plug SD cards in. They've done a very good job on that. Hopefully, we're going to see more devices like that. I think Rode have kind of proved that there's enough market demand now to manufacture sort of devices which sit somewhere between spending $10,000-$15,000 on a professional setup to spending sort of a few hundred basically on something that kind of does a sort of a professional thing. Yeah, quite a few people saying here that Rodecaster is a great device. Yeah,
DJ Mikey, good name.
Tascam US 42 is another one for $99. So yeah, there's loads of options out there. Again, it's one of these things, isn't it? When you're investing in equipment, I think there's enough information out there on YouTube to go and make a kind of informed decision before sort of taking the plunge. Phil, you've spent ages buying equipment and looking into that recently.
Yeah. Sort of just over the Christmas, I just thought I want to upgrade my kit, and sort of gone for sort of really good stuff that I've been fortunate enough to play around with at work, and so yeah, it's just a case of making the plunge. You don't have to spend tons, just spend well. Don't just buy something because it's expensive. Don't just buy something because it's cheap. Just invest in sort of good equipment, and I'm happy with my results anyway.
Yeah, but I think the key thing you did is you said, "Oh, can you take some equipment home?" And obviously, you borrowed it from the office. But if you know someone else who's got the bits of equipment, you're thinking, "Oh, I'm thinking about buying that," because sometimes spending $500 on a microphone, you do need to save up for it. It's not a sort of. It's not like spending 10 quid. You have to think, right, okay, am I really going to get a result from this? So it's always good to try before you buy it if you can, borrow someone else's. Or even you can rent stuff by the day, can't you?
You can, yeah. And also have a look on our site because we've reviewed a lot of equipment over the years. I mean, we've pretty much reviewed most of the kind of equipment that you would want to purchase. So I think that's probably a good place for people to look.
Absolutely. Okay. Should we take a couple more questions?
Yep.
So
what should we do? We should go with something live. We're not going to get through all the questions that we've got. We're going to have to sort of carry this over and maybe do another one sooner.
We're actually, I didn't even realize the time. We are running out of time now. I think like before we do, can we do this deep dive? Because I've really
let's do that. Yeah.
So first of all, let me just read the question and then we'll get into it. So this is a nice thing to finish off with. So this comes from Mark Sebastian, who has a station called Soul Spectrum. And he says, hi, James and the team. How can I take Soul Spectrum to the next level? I think it sounds great. I think it looks cool with the website and apps. Have you got any tips for media and marketing? Thanks, Radio.co. Keep up the great work. So I wanted to just have a quick look. So this is hopefully going to work. Here we go. So this is Soul Spectrum. So if you guys want to check it out, soulspectrum.uk. And straight away you get this kind of rather loud sort of flashing screen with flashing a load of soul artists, aren't they?
I like it.
So what do you guys think, first of all?
That appeals to me. Like personally, that appeals to me. I I guess maybe it's not instantly noticeable how you listen. There should probably be a big listen button on this somewhere.
Potentially above the fold. I mean, you scroll down and we
Yeah.
have the player here,
Yeah, I think.
which is fine. I think, yeah, potentially you could have like a little prompt just down at the bottom, just saying listen, which then nudges people down. But, you know, first, I think the first thing that these guys have done right is, you know, there's definitely, you land on this site and wow, it gets your attention. And straight away you see all these famous soul artists flashing up. So you know you're in the right place if you want to listen to soul music. So I think very on brand there.
It's got
player nice and easy, accessible. Obviously, you've got your links to Instagram and Twitter. We're going to have a look at those in a sec. Immediately, I can see that there's an app. So if I'm feeling like I can download an app, if I've got Google, if I'm maybe viewing this on my phone, that's good. Nice and clear. So again, I think the things they're doing right here, first of all, straight away, you land on the website, you know what it is. You can listen and you can download the app. So we've got a bit of images down here. That's pretty funky. Nice little bit of branding.
I think it's pretty strong branding. Yeah, you can see that they've thought about how they want to present themselves. I think that's really positive, actually.
Yeah. So the only thing I think is missing from this site, they've got merch here, actually. That's pretty cool as well. Really nice design, I think. You know, very, very vibrant. And they've clearly thought about how the look and feel of it is. Now, this is all on one page, okay? So these links just take you further than a page. So the first thing I would say is you need to start building out this website. There needs to be a bit more content on here, you know. Certainly start with a blog. Certainly start just writing articles about all of these artists, you know, because these artists are going to have huge followings. There's some big names here. So think about, like I said earlier, you know, top 10 Michael Jackson songs or top 10 Curtis Mayfield songs, or, you know, Curtis Mayfield's worst song, whatever it might be. Start thinking about your content strategy. Anything else to add on the website, guys?
Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. Actually, you need to build the site out. You need. I mean, you could argue that every show should have its own page, because then you're going to get ranking on that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Any DJs, anyone who's collaborating, give them their own page, give them their own section, and allow them to create content for you as well.
Yeah, again, like what you were saying before with the, you know, with MCR, there's people out there that want to write about this stuff. You'll find lots of people out there that want to write about soul music.
Yeah, totally. Big followings. And again, the benefit of having a niche station like this is, you know, there aren't huge amount of there's not a huge amount of competition, especially when you're thinking about commercial radio. This is quite specific. Again, linking to Spotify playlists, you know, if you can have playlists that are available on Spotify and you can publish them to other streaming platforms as well, think about Apple Music. Again, it helps you build your audience. And there's going to be people who are searching for like top soul playlists on those platforms as well. And in turn, you can use that to drive traffic to your station. So well worth curating some playlists. Okay, having a quick look at social media then. Instagram. So the thing I'd say is we got Soulful Easter here, which was, you know, quite a while ago now. Really, the rule of thumb with Instagram is you need to be posting a couple of times a day if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't, like once a day is good. But the other thing I'd say as well is, you know, sometimes we're not using hashtags here. Oh, we are actually. But I think the hashtags need to be more artist focused. So if you're thinking about this, jazz, soul, funk, which is fine, think about some of the artists people will be following, say Curtis Mayfield as a hashtag. You know, again, it looks pretty cool, but I think there could just be a bit more content that's a bit more engaging for people.
Yeah, people think even though, I'm just sharing pictures, you know, how much content can I do around that? But no, it's just a case of you just want to entice people in and just get them sort of talking about your page and sharing something. Can't believe they said this was the worst song. And, just if you just get a piece of meaty content just down to a picture, it's so much easier to share.
Yeah. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you go to jamesm.com/radio, there's a 5 sort of step checklist to starting a radio station, and there's loads and loads of content ideas in there. I think the same goes for Twitter, really. Like there's no questions here. We're not trying to engage anyone. So definitely worth sort of looking at how to engage people.
Yeah, you need to use social like a two-way conversation tool, in my opinion.
Totally.
Yeah, and you were saying about hashtags before. It's when you really have a deep dive on like Instagram or Twitter, you'll find the strangest hashtags, but for some reason they're the most popular ones. So have a look at other people's radio stations or other people's Instagram pages with a similar taste, and have a look at the strange, obscure things that they might be hashtagging, because there could be millions of people that follow that particular hashtag, and and it's just be creative and be clever with it.
Cool. Yeah, good advice. Got Mike back.
Yeah.
All right.
I just
So
let the cat in.
Should we do like we've pretty much run out of time now, guys? Should we do a couple more questions and then wrap things up with a couple of quick fire things?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Where can I find a super affordable supplier for home studio equipment in the UK? Phil, what do you reckon?
I mean, it's even if you're after something which you think is quite specific, like radio equipment, things like Amazon, it's often a first stop for people to go, because they supply everything, including things like radio. If you want the best microphone ever, it's probably available. It's probably the best microphone ever is probably not available on there, but there is so much stuff that you can get quite easily, and so Amazon's probably the first place I'd have a look at for more affordable things anyway.
Unofficially as well, it's very easy to return stuff to Amazon if you don't like it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is. That's a very
don't tell them I said that.
Yeah.
They'll be on to me.
So Raphael from Radio La Fusion adds how to podcast.
Yeah, okay. That's a good thing to finish up with then.
Yeah. So I think with podcasting, for stations, the way you need to think about it is every show that you've got is essentially a podcast. That's what a podcast is. A podcast is a show, whether you deliver it on a live stream or whether you deliver it on demand when someone wants to listen to it. Cool. So I think, obviously we're running podcast.co. We run podcast.co as well. It's a very easy way for you to take your shows, use the recording functionality if you're on the plan that has that, and then you can bounce your shows straight out to podcast.co. And then that distributes it to all the directories that your podcast needs to be on. And then let's say you can't get onto tuning as a radio station, you might be able to get in through the back door as a podcast. So you might still be able to get some of your shows onto TuneIn. So that's, what I would recommend ultimately, is you think about your shows as podcasts.
That's a good idea. Yeah. To finish up then, thanks very much for everyone who's been tuning in. We've had pretty good turnout tonight. I think we're going to be trying another one of these for the last Thursday of next month, whatever that might be. We'll get the dates sent out as soon as we can. Again, if you've got any more questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Lots of resources on the website, Radio.co. If you're interested in podcasting, there's a ton of stuff on podcast.co. Also, just quickly for anyone who's not seen it, if you're interested in getting booked on podcasts as a way to promote your radio station or to grow your personal brand, check out matchmaker.fm. It's a really cool tool. You can create a profile for your podcast, or you can create a profile as a guest, and it's an absolutely fantastic way to get the word out there. So, all right, I think that's it from us. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys.